From training to performing, join our big league conversation. Welcome to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast with your host, Eric Cressey.
Welcome back to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Cressey, and this is episode 83. This is going to be our last episode before a little bit of a holiday break, but we're going to go out with a bang because today's guest is a guy who's had a real profound impact on my career. Had a chance to work alongside him with USA Baseball. He's very skilled, not only in the world of player development, but also in terms of scouting, talent recognition. Just a really, really insightful guy that's been in many different roles in the baseball world. So he's got a lot of wisdom to share in this show. This episode is brought to you by Athletic Greens. It's an all-in-one superfood supplement with 75 whole food sourced ingredients to support your body's nutritional needs across 5 critical areas: energy, immunity, gut health, hormonal support, and healthy aging. I'm an avid user of Athletic Greens myself, in spite of the fact that I tend to be a supplement minimalist. To me, this is a product that is much more like whole food nutritional insurance as opposed to a true supplement. The ingredients have been carefully selected at the highest quality, most natural source. You get essential vitamins and minerals, digestive enzymes, prebiotics, probiotics, and that's the zero compromise approach from the company. It's plant-based, sourced from whole foods at the highest quality, so you won't find harmful chemicals, artificial colors or flavors, preservatives, or added sugar. Really, it's perfect for folks who are gluten and dairy free, paleo, keto, vegan friendly, great for people who are intermittent fasting, all that fun stuff. Personally, I love it for obviously our athletes who don't get enough nutritional benefits from fruits and vegetables because they don't eat enough. So it's a way to kind of plug in holes in diets. But also, I really like it for our college and professional athletes who may have complex travel schedules where quality food options aren't always at hand. On a personal level, I'm a husband, father of 3, and an entrepreneur. We split our time between 2 states, and I'm also still an avid lifter. So life is inherently crazy, and it can be stressful, and sleep deprivation is definitely something that we encounter. So I rely on Athletic Greens for part of my immune support, and believe firmly that it's made a big difference in keeping me healthy in spite of how crazy our lifestyle is. They've got a great offer in place. If you head to athleticgreens.com/Cressey, they'll get you 20 free travel packets with your purchase. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/Cressey, CRESSEY, and you can claim your special offer. Today's guest played baseball at William Penn University and graduated with a Bachelor of Arts degree in education with a concentration in kinesiology. He subsequently earned a master's in education in intercollegiate athletic leadership from the University of Washington. During that time, he interned in the front office with the Seattle Mariners. He began his college coaching career by serving as the pitching coach at Edmonds Community College from 2007 to 2009, and then joined the University of Arizona baseball staff in 2009 as the director of operations. He served in that position for 7 months before being appointed to the pitching coach position. He helped the team win the 2012 College World Series while serving as the Wildcats pitching coach until 2014. Along the way, he was chosen as the 2012 National Pitching Coach of the Year. From 2014 to 2015, he was the director of the 18 and under national team for USA Baseball. The program would go on to win the 2014 18 and under Pan American Championship gold medal and the 2015 18U Baseball World Championship gold medal. From 2015 to 2017, he served as coordinator of player development for the San Diego Padres. He was involved in all aspects of baseball operations, scouting, and player development. In September of 2018, he became the assistant head coach and pitching coach at Eastern Kentucky University. Please welcome to the show, Shaun Cole. Welcome to the show, Shaun.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to dive into some pitching and just hear how things have been going for you.
I'm excited for this because we first met. I want to say it was in Toronto in the middle of a massive blizzard. It was, I want to say 2010. So I remember distinctly, I committed to do this seminar, and Derek Johnson was on the docket, and DJ that was right when he signed on with the Cubs as their minor league pitching coordinator, and they needed somebody to fill in, and he was like, "You got to get Shaun Cole. He's doing amazing things at Arizona. This guy's a stud." And I remember watching your presentation. I'm like, he wasn't wrong, and we had breakfast. I may have been lunch. I can't remember what it was. It was in that little cafe alongside the seminar
Yep.
location, and you blew my mind. And so I think it's an exciting time because we've gotten a chance to work together in person over the years, and you provided me with a great opportunity with Team USA, and I'm excited to share you with a larger audience because I think there's we've had so many conversations where there are things that people can benefit from, that maybe they haven't heard. So we're gonna rock and roll with this.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and Derek Johnson's always been good to me. I've always appreciated him, and that convention in Toronto is, in my opinion, besides the ABCA, the next best coaches convention. Dirk does a great job, and I made it a point to stick around. I think you were speaking
Yeah,
last, if I remember right, it was Thursday night or Friday, but
yeah.
I made a point to stick around, and you and I have been friends ever since. Ever since, it's
Right
crazy.
on. All right, so let's talk about the path to coaching, and we're going to
Mhm.
talk about recruiting. We're going to talk about scouting, player development, all that stuff. How did you initially make the transition from playing to coaching, and what drew you to it, and what were like maybe the
Mhm.
initial struggles going from playing to coaching?
Yeah. Well, love of the game's always been there, and really, my bachelor's degree is in kinesiology. I was always intrigued by strength and conditioning and biomechanics and how to improve body movement and things of that nature. And I thought I was going to go that direction. And then when I finished in college, my junior college coach reached out to me and asked me if I wanted to be a pitching coach for a summer team up in the Northwest where I'm from. And I took the job, and I needed a job. I didn't have a job fresh out of college. And so I said yes, and really enjoyed it and liked it. And really, it kind of catapulted me into my next opportunity, which has kind of been what my career path has looked like a little bit. Is my next opportunity. I did an internship in the front office with the Seattle Mariners in baseball operations while I was going to grad school. So early on, I had a taste of pro ball and high school coaching, and then that kind of led me into junior college coaching at Edmonds Community College.
I'm curious. So like, one of the things that I've noticed about, I mean, you won at every level. I know that sounds crazy to say, but you won in junior college, right? You won at the University of Arizona. You won with Team USA. It was this track record. I'm curious, were there commonalities of those programs? I mean, I think early on in our coach career, sometimes we have success. We don't necessarily know why until we look at it in 10 years in hindsight. Like, what was it that you thought worked well early on in your coaching career, both in terms of your own development as a coach, but also in terms of the success that your teams had?
Mm-hmm. The common themes all the way through, and even as recent at Eastern Kentucky with the things we were able to do in the last couple of years. Um, Number one, just leadership from the head coach through the other assistants, and clear communication with the players. And then the other common theme that I've just seen a lot, and I'll give you an example from my time in junior college. I remember the head coach got a phone call from the athletic director that the players were in, and we had this huge indoor facility, and they were in there late at night, and he thought they were in there partying and had some girls and all this stuff. So the head coach drove over one night around 11:30, and they had wedged wood in the door. They were in there hitting, and the coach said, "Look, I'm not gonna stop these guys from doing that. I'm gonna give them keys to the facility." So the common theme with the teams that I've been a part of is the players have wanted it more than the coaches. The players have put in extra effort in the weight room. They've put in extra effort on the field, beyond what we're allowed under the NCAA rules. They're doing their own thing. So that's been a huge component, is just taking ownership of their careers and getting better. And I've benefited from that pretty much everywhere I've been.
One of the things I've actually been talking about, I had a conversation with a couple of our interns about it the other day, is this concept of why some players become good coaches and why other former players fail miserably at it. Like, what do you think? And granted, we're talking about you pitched at William Penn and then coached at
Mm-hmm.
Arizona. There was an upgrade in the caliber of baseball versus you hear about a retired major leaguer who becomes a manager or something like that. It doesn't go well, or someone who pitched and then became a
Mm-hmm.
pitching coach at that level and they just couldn't teach it. What do you think the big things that make people successful in those transitions are? What are the things that actually make some people fail?
Um, I can really only answer that question based off of my experience. uh, I I have a passion for really wanting to pour into guys and get them better. And I'm also, you can call it OCD or whatever, but attention to detail is a big thing, and I just don't let that slip with the players. And you've been around me before. I'm very direct with them about what the expectations are and what we're going to do, and I stand alongside them the whole way through to accomplish that. For me, and this will segue into a another topic we're going to talk about a little bit later, but I was a soft throwing lefty, so I had to be able to spin it and throw a change up effectively, and I've been blessed to work with guys that have velo and they can throw hard, and I've basically taught them how to pitch like I did, but they have the extra velo
Yeah.
to really back that up. So uh, I can't really speak for others and why they fail or why they have success, but for myself, I just think it's just consistency with what I'm doing every day and having a plan with what I'm doing.
You indirectly described exactly what I talked about with our community. So I have a theory. I think that what makes a lot of athletes successful is selfishness, right? You have to pour into yourself relentlessly in the way that you work. You have to eat on time. You have to sleep on time. You have to
Mm-hmm.
be meticulous in your preparation. You're inherently selfish. Being a
Yes.
coach is all about serving others. It's literally putting, I mean, I know how my knees feel at the end of a 10-hour day when I've been trying to help others. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's just the nature of it. You skip meals because the facility is busy, or, you stand on your head to do whatever it takes to be,
Mm-hmm.
to be in a position to help others. And I think that's why we see, you see like retired catchers, right? They're used to serving a pitching staff. It's everything that is offensive about them, gets put on the back burner because it's about managing a pitching staff, stuff like that. So I think there's something to be said. Some people they struggle with that transition of having to serve
Mm-hmm.
others and not be self-centered all the time. So
I would also add to that even though you're serving others, I still think there's a commonality. There's a deep passion within you to be successful though at
yeah,
whatever it is you're doing, and that pours into the other people around you.
yeah. You have to be
Would you agree with that,
and
or
you have to be intrinsically, motivated.
yeah?
It's not. I mean, I know because I've been around you enough that's something that, I don't want to say it's on to the next, but it's very much like you're always looking to accomplish something new. Like
Mm-hmm.
I said, you did it at junior college, you did it at Arizona, you did it at Team USA. So it's intriguing, and I know that was one of the things that drew you to pro ball was
Mm-hmm.
doing at that level. So speaking on the kind of the Arizona side of things, you had a reputation for being one of the best recruiters in the country while at Arizona, and that's also something that probably served as a foundation for the appointment with Team USA, where you had to look at a large volume of athletes to pare down and eventually get to a 20-man national team roster. So I think there's an amazing feather in your cap there, but it's also probably something that maybe forces us to overlook some of the challenges that come along with recruiting. I mean, you're effectively selling a product to a 15, 16, 17-year-old kid and their family. So let's talk about the recruiting process. What are the big mistakes that you see high school players and their parents make in their outreach to colleges when they want to go to an Arizona or Eastern Kentucky or wherever it may be?
Mm-hmm. Um, I think one thing that gets overlooked is not really understanding the roster needs and the roster limitations. Um, just assuming that they're talented enough to come play at a place, and then wondering why maybe you're not recruiting them. And it's probably because some rosters already have two or three catchers, and we don't need five or six of those guys running around. Or and then the other thing I would add in there is maybe just poor self evaluation. Like, not everybody can go to LSU, not everybody can go to Texas. It's just those are elite places, and they're looking for certain things. So just having that understanding and really looking at, okay, well, where do I fit in best? And then the other thing for me personally, I'll speak. I'm not a big email guy. I
Mm-hmm.
like phone call. I like interaction. I like getting to know people. I like talking to them. So if you're going to bombard me with emails, that's going to be a difficult path for getting to me, at least. I know others love email communication and things of that nature, but for me personally, pick up the phone and call me, or text me and set up a time to get on the phone and talk.
I like that. What about top like recruiting pet peeves? What do you see that makes you roll your eyes? Whether it's just watching Twitter or even when you're out actually recruiting a kid, you're at a game, you're watching him play. What are the things that are absolute no nos for for teenagers?
Bad body language,
Hmm.
lack of competitiveness, pointing the finger at others. Um, uh, just not giving good effort. I can go on and on with that list. There's certain things like there's a saying that I've heard a lot. It's easier to cross names off a list than add them. Uh, so, and especially when you're talking about the Arizonas of the world, or like I said earlier, LSU, Texas, Florida, places like that, the list is so long
Hmm.
that it's just way easier to say, okay, we're not interested in that guy, versus I'm going to add more and more and more. It just doesn't work that way. So control the things you can, and that's really your effort and who you are as a person. I picked certain players for either Arizona or the national team, based off of how I saw them. Well, I'll just say it. Will Benson was one of those guys. Will
Yeah.
Benson was not a guy that was, a lot of people didn't think he would be able to hit at that level, or they thought he wasn't refined enough or polished enough baseball player. And I remember going out to see him play. And number one, I mean, he's a freak. Like when
Hmm.
you see him, he's just a large human being. But his effort and energy is really what got him that invite. I on purpose, I don't sit behind home plate when I go out to recruit. I go down the lines. I'm
Hmm.
not a gear guy. I'm usually dressed in like a t-shirt and a bucket hat.
Hmm.
And I do that on purpose so I can stand by the dugout or I can stand by the bullpens and I can hear the players talking to each other and see how they're engaging. And those things are important. They're really
Yeah.
important because I think if you have a good plan in place from a coaching standpoint within your program or organization, you're going to be able to develop those skills. It's very difficult to develop the human being, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So those are the things that I'm always paying attention to when I go out.
So on the topic of Will Benson, I had the Indian scouts ask me about him prior to the
Hmm.
draft.
Hmm.
And the thing that I told them two things. One, literally every rep is done in the warm up, right? You watch warm ups and
Hmm.
you ask them to do five aside, they give you three aside, then they start chatting with their guy next to them, and then they jog to the end
Hmm.
of the line. Will would always be the last one done because he did every single rep. He did it meticulous. He did it perfectly. He
Yep.
intentionally went down to like the end of the line to make sure that there was no distractions. So that was the first thing. The second thing, handwritten thank you note. Probably
Oh.
3 weeks
Yep.
after we got back from Japan, we won the
Yep.
gold medal. Just like you can't teach that. That's maybe you can when a kid's 6, 7, 8 years old. That's good parenting. So shout out to the Bensons. But
Yeah.
I those things stand out in my mind. You don't forget them.
When you're evaluating really talented players, I joke all the time. Like my grandma can tell me that Michael Kopech can throw hard and that he's
Hmm.
going to be successful, with just his talent. The difference maker, and this is one of the things that I always, and I learned this early on from Coach Wazakowski and Coach Lopez. Get there early. See who exactly what you just said. See who's skipping reps in warm ups. See who's looking in the stands when they're playing catch instead of focusing on what they need to focus on. And and with pitchers, I'd get there early and I'd watch their pregame warm up and I'd watch their bullpen before the game, and I watch what they do in between innings, especially when they have an inning that didn't go their way or there
Hmm.
were errors made behind them. I watch those things and that's the stuff that I'm really evaluating. The
Yeah.
the talent and the ability, for the fit for your program or organization. I think most people can figure that out fairly quick. Does it fit? It's all those other areas that are going to they're going to make the difference. Taylor Trammell's another example. He's another guy I invited that really was not a polished baseball player, but an A plus human being.
Hmm. Those things go a long way. Now, I'm curious. I've heard stories from various college sports about how they might have to like unrecruit players. I think that was like a Nick Saban quote, when they
Yeah.
actually arrive on campus because you go through this incredible courtship process, both to, pick a school. In some sports, guys are tweeting their offers as they go. They go through the draft process where every advisor in the world tells them they're going to go 3 to 5 out rounds higher than they actually do if they're going to go at all. So they're
Mm-hmm.
just showered with praise during this process and all the draft hype. do you have to unrecruit people when they get there? Like, what's the avenue through which you bring guys back down to earth and, you make them realize, hey, you're part of something much bigger than just you now.
Yeah. So I learned, I got burned early on my first year recruiting at Arizona by doing exactly what you just said, and so I learned early on, I'm going to be brutally honest with these guys when I'm recruiting them. This is what you're signing up for. This is the expectation. This is the standard here. This is how Coach Lopez is going to react to you, or even at EKU. I still do it the same. I'm very direct, upfront, and honest of what it's going to be, and I do that on purpose so I don't have to unrecruit them when they get here, or they decide to go somewhere else. It's just a process of elimination, and I never take that personally. Like, if it's a better fit for you somewhere else, then I'm glad I was upfront and honest about what it's going to be. So I really have not dealt with that. Just because I've been very direct and upfront early on of what it's going to be.
I think there's a lesson there for all of the athletes is if someone is promising, rainbows and butterflies and you're going to be the Friday night starter as a freshman and all this stuff, you probably need to look a little bit deeper about what actually is really going to happen when you go to college sports.
Yeah. And I think that's unfair to the group of guys that you have within your program who have put in the work, and you're promising to, young players that aren't even in your program, that haven't put in the work, that haven't been in the weight room, that haven't really bought into what it is, that they're going to be your Friday guy or hitting the 4-hole or the 3-hole. I just think that's crazy.
It's got to be earned. So maybe changing gears a little bit. You've seen pitching change a ton since your
Mm-hmm.
first coaching opportunity, and 13 years ago. What for you are the non-negotiables of being a successful pitcher? What hasn't changed since 2007?
Yeah. Number one, everybody's always going to say this, but the ability to throw strikes. And then one of the X factor for me has always been, whether it was at U of A or in junior college or Team USA or pro ball, was the feel for secondary pitches. I can go out, and especially now with the way it is, you can go out and see plenty of guys lighting up the radar gun, but can they spin it for a strike, or can they throw a changeup in a hitter's count? Those things show advanced feel for me for a young guy. And I just feel like when players show up in college or on the professional side, they're going to get in the weight room. They're going to have a disciplined throwing program. They're going to mature. So the velo it's going to continue to increase, or it's going to maintain. It's the secondary pitches that are the real X factors. And those are difficult to teach guys if they've never really had feel for it. Athleticism, I've always been a big multi sport guy. Whenever I've engaged with players that are not just specializing at 14 or 15 or 16 years old, they're playing multiple sports. That athleticism has always sped up the development process on the mounds,
Mm-hmm.
and then just competitive nature. I'm always looking for guys that have that competitive nature. Like Braxton Garrett always comes
Yeah,
to mind for me with that team that you and I were a part of.
yeah.
They're eager, like they want the big game, and those guys, they're all, for the most part, they're always going to be successful.
No doubt about it. And I get to see it. It's, I saw Braxton obviously when he was 17. He works out at the facility. I see Braxton 6 days a week, and
Hmm?
it doesn't go away. You know what I mean? If you have
No.
the ability to compete, you compete in every aspect of your life. You do it in the weight room. It's just the unbelievable ability to be like a 24-hour athlete, and it
Hmm.
also makes you a sponge for finding ways to get better. That's the stuff that I've noticed with those guys. Whether it's talking with Benson about nutrition back on Team USA, or what Braxton's doing from a pitching analytics standpoint. If you're a competitive guy, you have to be open minded because it's a way to
Hmm.
basically expand your horizons. So here's
Yep.
my so what do you see now that's evolved from '07 that frustrates you about the game, or that you think maybe has gone down a bad path that we need to right the ship a little bit? Maybe the pendulum's swung too far in the wrong direction.
Mm. Man, that's a good question. I don't want to come across as I'm beating anything up, but
Mm.
you're asking the question. So just what Showcase Baseball, I think,
Yeah.
has been like early on as a coach. I was at the beginning of Showcase Baseball when I was recruiting at Arizona, and it was really starting to take off. And it's great. It's a one-stop shop. You can see a bunch of things that you need to see. But now looking back on it, when these guys show up in my world or other big time schools or pro ball, you're almost having to teach them the finer points of the game to help win. Like, it's been very clear for me from day one since I started coaching. Everything that we do on the field needs to be under the umbrella of winning.
Mm-hmm.
But like, this is a results. We're in a business that's driven by results. I don't care what anybody says. Just to be very clear about it, is it's winning. And I think some guys have lost touch with that. I would go to events where I would see a guy start a game and he'd throw his first 3 innings and he was done, and he'd come in the dugout and ask what his pitch count was, and he'd put his shoes on and he'd leave. He doesn't
Yeah.
even know if the team won that day. And that's not setting you up for success in the places that you want to go. There's a disconnect with that. And then just things that I've seen and also heard more and more. And this is not, once again, I think it's just the excitement with technology now. And I understand it. And I think it's great. I think it's making everybody better. I think it's making you more precise with what you're doing in development. But I've never seen a game where somebody's going to be pitching and after every pitch they're going to look at an iPad.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's something that has gone a totally different direction where I don't allow it with my guys. Where, I mean, we're not going to talk about your spin rate or any of the metrics from Rapsodo during your bullpen. That's going to be after. That's going to be separate. You need to get in your bullpen. You need to execute pitches and be competitive. And those are probably the two things that come to mind for me right now. And
Mm-hmm.
like I said, I'm not beating that stuff up. I think it's been great for the game on both sides, showcases and technology. But I just think you can't go in extremes. And right now, I feel like we're, at least the last couple of years, I feel like we've gone in extremes in the industry. But we're starting. I think I'm starting to see it shift or balance a little bit. Would you agree with that?
I would, and I think we kind of talked offline about just the concept of like the soft skills of coaching. And we actually had Tom Kohler was a recent guest, and Tom's recently retired, and is certainly spoken very candidly about like, hey, just because you've got a high spin rate four seam or you got a banger curveball, like that might be a great pitch, but if you're not confident throwing that pitch in a certain scenario, right? There's what the analytics tell you, and then there's also what you are confident in your ability to execute. So I think those are things that have to be, constantly reconciled, and that's where communication, relationships, all that stuff really comes about.
Mm-hmm. Like, understand what you're doing when you're giving the ball. Your job is to get hitters out, and that's to help your team win. All the other stuff is going to enhance your ability to do that on a more consistent basis. But for me, they're two separate worlds. Like I had the opportunity. You set it up for me to sit in on some of Cap's meetings, like with C-Shack while I was down there, and that was in the off season, and
Mm-hmm.
they're dissecting areas that need improvement, areas that like things that had changed in his delivery in those meetings, and that stuff's great. But how old is Steve?
Steve is 34 now.
Right. How
Yeah,
long has he been pitching in the big leagues?
nine and change. So
Yeah, so he
yeah.
understands his body, he understands his adjustments, he understands the feel of his pitches. And like, if we're doing that with 14, 15, 16-year olds, I just think that that's where we're losing the foundation of what they need to do to be successful. And that's, throw strikes, and like we talked about earlier, throw at least one secondary pitch for a strike, and understand how to control the run game. I mean, these are all different aspects, and like, that stuff needs to be there. I'm not saying don't let these guys use Rapsodo or do a drive line or any of that stuff. I'm not saying that, but there needs to be a balance with it.
Interesting. So and it kind of speaks to my next question is, I remember you talking in detail about the success you'd had with freshmen, right? Guys that came in, they were very green around the gills, and you had a very meticulously mapped out program from, July when they came on campus earlier, right up through probably the end of the summer after their freshman year, to optimize their developmental process while at Arizona. What were maybe the challenges that you saw in that 17 to 18-year-old incoming freshman that the things that you need to address, and then what were some of your action items with those guys over that 18 months that followed?
Um, it's always common about 3/4 of the way through the season they start to break down physically and mentally,
Mhm.
which I think is just normal. And I think the way, at least what I've done, even more recent, is just telling them that those things are going to happen, like being very open and honest about what it is, and then how we can combat that. And one of the things we did when I was at U of A, and we were getting ready to implement it here at EKU, is, instead of sending guys out to play more in the summer, they were staying back with the strength and conditioning coach and getting in that weight room and getting stronger. It's a lot of guys, especially if you're getting talented baseball players, when they get into college or professional baseball, it's not so much the baseball that beats them down. It's they're not physically there yet, and they're being manhandled by guys that are 2 or 3 years older than them, that have been dedicated to the weight room and that have 20 more pounds on them. And then also just the mental side of it. They're not used to pitching in front of, whatever it is, 6,000 people at LSU that are yelling at you
Yeah.
and saying crazy things to you when you're warming up in the bullpen. And then you add in the academic side of it, and the social aspects of just life, and all those things start to kind of pile up on them. So for me, the more that I can talk about what it is, and tell them what it is, and have open communication and dialogue with them, I think it helps them. And just tell them every day, like, look, we're just trying to get 1% better, just a little bit better. We're not trying to go from being a freshman in the fall to an All-American in 3 weeks. It doesn't work that way. So, I would use like North Carolina, well, Kentucky basketball. I'm here in Lexington right now. Like, call it Calipari. His teams always start slow, but man, they finish strong, and that's the key. And I think when you speak to young players about that, like, look, it's not how you pitch in this inner squad today, it's how you look and how you impact the team in May and June.
Mhm.
And I think you take a little bit of pressure off them, by just having those conversations.
Picking the long term game. And
Mm-hmm.
so you're one of the few guys I know who can maybe speak to talent identification slash scouting, but also player development. Historically speaking, in the college realm, you can't do that, right? It's a smaller staff. So like the people who recruit are the people who coach.
Mm-hmm.
In pro ball, it's different, right? And you had a couple years in pro ball to see that, where you see scouting departments, you obviously see player development departments that they communicate, but they're very different departments.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, do you think we can fundamentally separate the two? Is it ever going to be like a clear delineation, or do you think that there has to be a lot of go between to make it a scenario where the scouts find players that can be developed?
Yeah, I think the organizations that are doing it really well, and you're a part of them, one right now, there's a little bit of crossover in that communication. And I think that that's what was trying to be accomplished, or still is being accomplished, with the Padres. When I was there, I was one of a handful of people that had a hybrid role, and AJ Preller, I think, had a vision of having those crossovers so that the communication, those lines aren't blurred.
Mhm.
So there's a clear understanding when you get a young, either high school guy or even a college guy that rolls into professional baseball, and he doesn't look very good early on because he's struggling because of the adjustment. Um, I was able to tell some of those coaches, look, this is what I saw, this is what this guy is, and this is what he's going to be. If anything, professional baseball gave me more patience, because I saw a lot of guys early on that struggled, and then after a year of all those reps that you get in professional baseball, they turned into something really good. So I just, and I'm speaking, you know, without being in some certain organizations that I think have a lot of success. I think the Indians do it really well too.
Yeah,
I think they cross over very well in those areas with a handful of people, so that information and things are a lot clearer and it's understood better.
absolutely. And so Team USA was one of the really big highlights of my coaching career for a lot of reasons. Like, first off, we had you were wildly progressive. So you had Tanner Swanson, Matt Blake, and me all on a staff. I'm pretty sure you had Tanner and Matt sleeping on a cot in your room for part of it, at national team trials, coaching. Before the final selection was taken, you had Matt Hobbs, who was doing great things at Wake Forest at the time. Now on to Arkansas. Butch Thompson was on there. I
Mhm.
mean, it was a collection of really, really good coaches, and I learned a ton from all of them. So I'm curious, retroactively though, like I'm sure you look back on those guys. I mean, we have a couple of them that still train with us to this day.
Mm-hmm.
You got three guys, Moniak and Braxton and Ian Anderson, all made their major league debuts this year. So I'm curious, as you look back on those 15 to 17-year-olds, they've grown up, they've become stud prospects, a couple big leaguers. When you look back on those talented groups, what separated the ones that thrived after that experience from
Mm-hmm.
the ones that didn't? And then, also maybe part two is like, I remember when, actually, just answer that question. I'll ask my part two afterwards. What separated the ones from that made it from
Yeah.
the ones that didn't?
Uh, you know, I think I was pretty lucky. Both of those national teams, a large majority of those players are successful, or they're knocking on the door of the big leagues, or they're
Yeah.
in the big leagues right now. So there weren't many that I think struggled or have failed. But the things that I noticed with a lot of those guys is it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. They all love the game.
Mm-hmm.
I remember, and this was the year before you were with the group, but Nick Madrigal, the reason why he made the national team was at the end of every Tournament of Stars game, his uniform was caked with dirt. I'm like, man, are you out there just rolling in the dirt or what? Like this guy, he just loved it. And the competitive nature, that another huge separator. But the other key thing, and this is why those national teams are so special, is the guys that have been successful or have gotten to the big leagues faster. All of them, they were real good at phasing out the outside noise. When we go and you were a part of it, you lived it. You got different time schedules. You got food that's being provided by the
Yep.
host country that may not be what you like. The schedule is it's nonstop. You have
Yep.
no days off,
Yep.
and you're playing all different types of, like Japan plays a different style, Cuba plays a different style, Chinese Taipei, and you're not able to scout those teams. You don't really know what you're going into with competition. So for me, and I think that's why so many major league teams or GMs evaluate the national teams, is because it's just giving you a clear picture of how these guys are going to handle adversity. And for the most part, most of those guys handled it really well, and that's why I'm not surprised that they're succeeding the way they are.
That's interesting. So I remember distinctly. So right in the last week, we were at Cal State Fullerton for it. We had 28 guys that are doing the final cut from 28 to 20. And
Mm-hmm.
I distinctly remember Coach Cicchini at the front of the room. He
Mm-hmm.
talked about, hey, my son was cut, from here. And in that moment, I thought of Tyler Beatty. Tyler Beatty was cut his going into his senior high school. It was an unbelievable motivator for him, and he became a
Mm-hmm.
first round pick the following year. But Cicchini said in that moment, he's like, "Don't forget, Mike Trout got cut from Team USA,"
Yeah.
and it always was a line that stuck with me. And I look back and like, how many guys do you see that were ones that just you didn't see it for whatever reason, or that they surged afterwards? Because you went through a ton of guys. I mean, to get to
Yeah.
this final 20-man roster, you've got to see 2,000, don't you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Nathan Durst with the White Sox, he's a national cross checker. Him and I, we would start with those rosters in February, and it's a you're selecting 108 guys, and you're cutting it down to 40 and then down to 20. And I'm gonna give you a prime example, because I kick myself almost every day, and I hope he's listening or someone tells him, because I apologize. Royce Lewis, I made I made a mistake, and his high school coach, Brett McKay, called me multiple times, and I went out and saw Royce. I think I went and saw him 4 times, and I just didn't. It's poor on my part, and I remember, and you'll probably remember this. We played the Brewer scout team
Yep.
at Fullerton, and Royce Lewis led the game off with a triple. And I never said anything to anybody, but after that game, I'm just like, man, I made a huge mistake. And there's just so many good players, and you're gonna make mistakes, and that's the beauty of USA baseball and the national team is, you're gonna have some guys that don't make it. And I agree with you. Think about this. That year you were there, and I would like to fact check this, but we had 3 number 1 overall picks in the Tournament of Stars. So Hunter Green, Mickey Moniak, Adley Rushman. Okay.
Yep.
Adley Rushman didn't make the national team. That's another
Yeah.
example. He just didn't perform. He just didn't perform well that week, and it's such a small sample size, and it's such a challenge for those guys, and there's so much pressure to it that it stinks when they have a tough week. But that's yeah, it's a crazy deal. One thing that I didn't add in there that I do want to add in, the other commonality with the guys that I've seen be successful is they did a really good job of pouring into themselves off the field. And an example I'll give is Forrest Whitley.
Yeah.
Connecting with you and when we were done in Japan and him going all in with you and totally changing his body, like I'm not surprised he's he hasn't made it to the big leagues yet for various reasons, but he's going to, and once he gets there, I think he's going to be very successful.
And there were a lot of those guys, and I even look at just what Ian Anderson. I mean, Ian Anderson was
Mhm.
spectacular in his major league debut, and then
Yeah.
all year into the postseason. I mean, I remember Ian, in a bases loaded situation against Mexico on I mean, it felt like a backfield in Japan.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you just don't get that pressure in upstate New York if you're Ian Anderson. You know what I mean?
No.
You can be that kid throwing 93 to 95 with a great curveball, and you're never going to have to get out of your comfort zone. So I think that's why Team USA. I know there are guys that skip out on it, and
Hmm.
things like that. Like to me, it makes your season run longer, but it's the absolute best chance to like actually show what you're capable of doing on
Yeah.
like 15,000 people against Japan in Japan with Japanese umpires. Like you can't find a better way to test your mettle.
No, in the year before, the group that I had, we're playing in Mexico against Cuba, and same deal. I mean, it seems to be, and I'm probably going conspiracy theory here, but I don't think we ever had an American umpire on any of those crews played in the gold medal games or any of the critical games, and that's okay. And that's one of the things that we try to do is prepare those guys mentally before we left the states for what it's going to be, and as long as we did a good job with that, they were going to be okay. But yeah, that experience, beyond just showcasing your ability in tough moments, but also representing your country and all that. It's just to me, it's such a great experience.
I can even remember, at Fullerton, because Alan Jaeger was out there helping out.
Mhm.
You had Matt Blake, and I remember you talking with
Mhm.
those guys and saying, "Listen, remember we're managing pitchers. We're not coaching pitchers. In other
Right.
words, you're not overhauling deliveries a week before we go to Japan. Like right now, it's all about you're boosting confidence. You're teaching guys when
Right.
to use pitches in different kind of dynamics. But it speaks to those guys developed, even though nothing was changed. They developed because of
Yeah.
the diversity they faced and how they were maybe mentally and physically prepared for that adversity."
Yeah, I had that both years and I get it, where coaches were so eager to work with those guys, and it's such a small, window of time we have with them, coming in and tinkering and doing those things just wasn't. It's just not going to work. And I remember my first year we were in Houston, training to go to Mexico, and it's 95 degrees and humid, and I'm telling the coaching staff, like, listen, these guys played a high school season, they've played most of the summer, and we need to have short, crisp, quick practices and get them off their feet. And the first day we go out, it was almost a 4 hour practice, and I'm just like, man. And I get it though, the
Yeah.
eagerness to work with those guys and be out there. It's such a fun experience. And then, like you referenced earlier, all those coaches, and selfishly for me, I basically hired a bunch of my friends, my buddies, to do it, and I could have been out there all day too, but I knew you know we're looking at the end game, the end result, like be fresh and be really good for the gold medal game, not teeter out, in the first 3 or 4 games because we were blowing it out in practice and overhauling things. It just doesn't work that way. And I know some guys probably got frustrated with me and because of that, but it's just understanding, what we were trying to accomplish and what that timetable looked like.
And you had the most underwhelming bullpen catcher in history. You survived in spite of him. I don't do. Do we need to tell the story?
Well, go ahead, because you almost got me. I think you almost got me suspended for
I don't know.
field and celebrating.
No, so I mean, the long story short is you have a 20-man roster for international competition, so it doesn't
Hmm.
exactly allow for three catchers. And I think we had one catcher that got Montezuma's revenge or something like that, was on IVs and was not available for the gold medal
Yeah.
game. So I was always catching bullpens. So I've caught Forrest Whitley, I've caught Ian Anderson, I've caught Braxton Garrett, I've caught all those guys. But I distinctly remember in the gold medal game. We're at Koshin Stadium in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm down on the right field line. I don't know if you remember. So basically, we wanted to throw on field because it was kind of like a rainy night. The guys didn't
Yeah.
want to just warm up. They wanted to get the feel for the wet baseball. So it's the ninth inning. We're up 2-1, and Reggie Lawson's pitching. I'm down in
Mm-hmm.
right field catching. And the way the fields are set up, you're on the field, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
the bullpen is out there. So my back is to the right field corner. And I'm just like, I don't want to be a national distraction. Like, if I miss one of these balls from Bergner, it's going to roll onto the field. It's going to stop the game in the middle of this. Benson's like right there. He's probably, busting my chops on it. But
Mm-hmm.
I distinctly remember, I think Reggie got to 2 strikes. There was nobody on base or something like that. And Bergner turned around. He looked at me, he goes, Cress, get ready to celebrate. And he turns around and starts to take like 2 steps towards the dugout. And you got to the top of the dugout step and you yelled like, get back there. I'm
Yeah.
superstitious. I hate that stuff. Like,
Yeah.
it always stands out in my mind.
Yeah, well, I've lived it. I've lived it. I've lived it either with our team, or I've seen some of our opponents do the same thing where they think the game's wrapped up and they start packing up their bullpen, and guys move down. They start taking their cleats off and they're
Mhm.
walking down to the dugout, and then all of a sudden you see that offense. They start to put something together and come back.
Mhm.
So to this day, I still do the same thing. And,
Yeah.
and, and, like for the first time when I get on guys for doing it, they kind of look at me weird, and then I explain it to them, and they get it. They understand. And I'm telling you right now, you can go out and watch games and see a team do that. And for whatever reason, it's the game coming back and punishing you for thinking
Karma.
that it's sewed up and it's over. Now, one thing I want to add to your bullpen catching job, that mysteriously that catcher's gear has disappeared, and I don't know if it ended up in the Cressey Hall of Fame or if it's
It might be in
on
Cooperstown.
eBay, Cooperstown, or like. And luckily, I got so lucky because the guy that oversaw the umpires in Japan was Gus Rodriguez, who was a Pac-12 umpire, and I know his son. He's the head coach at Bellarmine High School up in NorCal, and he came over to me one day and said, "Hey, Shaun, who's your bullpen catcher out there?" And he's not officially on the roster, is he? I said, no. And he's like, "Yeah, you got to keep him off the field." I said, "Okay,
they
we'll
they,
rein him."
they
But
stuck me in the back under
it's
the
a, it's
stadium.
you know what? You earned it. I had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich earlier today, and every time I have PB and J, I think of
Whatever
of
it
you
takes.
making like 40 PB and J's in the morning. So you earned it.
Absolute humility. It's what you got to take. And then I actually still have a Japanese newspaper. We were
Uh-huh.
leaving the next day, and it was in the airport, and we were front page for beating them. And
Yep.
on the front page of this Japanese newspaper is an old dude with a receding hairline racing to the dog pile with a bunch of 17
Yep.
year olds. So it's a good story for the ages.
But
Um,
that's what it's about.
yeah.
That's what it's about. Seriously.
All right, so changing subjects. Let's talk about the changeup, because you hinted at it as something that made you a good coach because you had to rely on it when you
Hmm.
maybe didn't have the same arm speed. Maybe it's that you're left-handed, but I feel like the conversations we've had over the years about developing elite changeups are some of the ones that maybe stand out the most. So what are some of the big rocks for you when you teach it? You get that 17-year-old kid who's green around the kills that just gets to campus. What are you starting with?
Yeah. So for me, and this is for the entire pitching staff. They it's in court. The changeup is incorporated into their daily throwing program. So every day I ask those guys to throw 8 to 10 changeups at anywhere from 90 to 120 feet. And I'm not asking for accuracy. I'm asking for arm speed. And then after they get 8 to 10 of those, then they come into about anywhere from, I don't know, 50 to 60 feet. Well, actually, probably 60, 70 feet. And I ask them to long hop their partner with about 5 of them. And that's just getting extension out front and finishing that change up off with their middle finger, and just getting feel for it. And then in their bullpens, for the most part, until guys get a little bit older and a little more experience in the program, I script every bullpen. And so there's going to be a certain number of changeups in their bullpens, and usually those are in hitter counts. And then early in the fall in inter squads, the first couple inter squads are all fastballs, and then we'll graduate to fastball changeup, and then they will eventually get to where they can mix in their breaking balls. But I I just think the changeup's an equalizer. If anything, it's keeping the fastball fresh, but it's also an equalizer in those 2-0, 2-1, 3-1 counts. And really, a lot of that I stole from John Savage at UCLA. He really does a good job of teaching his guys long hold, slide step, change ups, and it would tear our guys up a lot. And so I'll give Coach Savage a lot of credit for that. I kind of, I bought into the changeup a lot more after that. And then Dewey Robertson with the Tampa Bay Rays, he was another one that had a lot of influence on me adding in more changeups. He was the pitching coordinator for the Rays, or he still is. But he told me that early on with a lot of their prospects, it's 50% fastball and then changeup.
I love that. It's just use it more. You know what I mean? Make it a priority if it is a priority.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and understand why. And like I said, and the other thing too is, and it goes back to the way I pitched, and then also Coach Lopez was big on breaking balls. But I've always said to our guys, spin to win. Like we're gonna spin it, and we're gonna have the ability to throw an 0-0 breaking ball or a breaking ball in any count for a strike, and then also have the ability to throw a 2-strike breaking ball and understand the difference between the two. So for me, secondary pitches, like I said earlier, like those are the equalizers. Guys are going to throw hard, but I've seen it. One of the guys, and he's probably going to hate that I'm going to tell this, but early on in his career, UCLA for 3 years, I had to watch Garrett Cole on Friday night and then Trevor Bauer on Saturday, and we would be able to compete with Garrett Cole, and he's sitting 97, 99, and that was just because early on in his career he didn't have really good secondary pitches. But then on Saturday, Bauer would abuse our guys, and that's because he could throw a curveball and a changeup and then a fastball up or a fastball under the hands. And same with Mike Leake. Mike Leake was one of the better college pitchers I've seen at Arizona State, and that's because your timing was off the entire time in those ABs.
Mm-hmm. And that's an important lesson now. Garrett was different back then. Not everybody had 97 to 99. Like you're going to run into 95 plus on every Division I college roster now. It's a thing. So, all right.
But who can win it? I just
Yeah.
the better teams that you see, and I'm going out on a limb with this.
Yep.
The better teams that you see get to Omaha, the ones that can really pitch, a lot of them they know how to pitch. It's not just we're going to beat you with velo, and you're even seeing that in the big leagues. I think the percentages have gone up in the last number of years of secondary pitches being thrown, just because hitters for the last decade, what do you think they've been doing? They've been hitting off of velo machines, and they're seeking fastballs. So
we got to start recruiting it differently. Now, I'm curious with like the changeup, how long will you stick with a particular grip? Because there are guys that struggle their entire career to find something that's comfortable. Like, do you run it for 8 weeks, and if it's not feeling right, then you change it? What's your kind of like mindset on that?
Well, one thing that I do, I'm big on tinkering with grips. I put out for the throwing programs. I'll put a box out where I'll get like 9 baseballs where I'll draw different grips of big leaguers. So like I taught a lefty a couple of years ago a screwball. I've taught a couple guys split fingers, and I allow them to tinker with those different grips. So the one thing with the changeup is if guys, especially guys with big hands, they have a tough time with the standard circle change grip. I've taught a lot of them split changes. I went out and spent some time with Butch Thompson a couple years ago, and Casey Mize was there, and he had that split change grip. And I took a picture of it when I was there, and I've taught, Aaron Oceanbine's a guy in the Dodgers organization that I still think was the best closer in college baseball two years ago at EKU. His numbers were stupid. I taught him a split change because he couldn't throw a changeup, and that pitch, he's still throwing it now in the Dodgers organization. So early on, I don't like to let them, especially if they're not comfortable with it, because I do think it's a mindset thing. It's the curse of the good arm in high school that you can blow fastballs by everybody, so they're not really working on the changeup. They're not throwing it, and they also think it's a weak pitch. So early on, I'm really trying to get their mentality to understand that that's a power pitch, just like your breaking ball. That's a power pitch, and we're going to throw it aggressively. And once they do that and they start changing their mindset, and they get more aggressive with it, they gain more confidence, and the grip really doesn't factor in as much anymore. I really believe a lot of it is coming in. They think a changeup's just a soft pitch, and they're not really bought into throwing it aggressively.
That's a very good point. All right, so we always wrap up with a lightning round,
Yeah.
and so it's quick hitter questions, and you can answer however long you want. But I know you're a voracious reader. We will text podcast recommendations back and forth.
Yeah.
What's one book that every player should read?
Okay. Well, I do love to read, so if it's okay, if I can give two.
You can get as many as you want.
Okay. Sweet. So there's two books for the last number of years with pitching staffs that I've had that I will send them an audio book usually in August, and then we'll cover it in the fall. And the first one is Chop Wood, Carry Water by Joshua Medcalf, and that's just about the process. It's about a samurai, an American that goes over and gets in with samurai warriors and learns that culture and just learns about the process. And then the most recent one that I've given to the pitching staff is it Takes What It Takes by Trevor Moawad,
Yeah,
because neutral thinking has been I'm intrigued by it. Getting away from positive thinking, negative thinking, just staying in the moment, and regardless of the result, moving on to the next thing. And I know the guys really love that. So those are two great books that I think every player should invest in.
that's a good one. What about coaches?
Yeah, coaches. I have two for this one also. The Gold Standard, Coach K.
Hmm.
Outstanding book. It talks about the process with the Olympic team, and I got a lot from that. And then the second one is it's called Getting to Us: How Great Coaches Make Great Teams, by Seth Downing, and it's every chapter is a different coach. So it has Harbaugh, it has Dabo Swinney, Tom Izzo, Urban Meyer, Coach K, Brad Stevens, the women's basketball coach at UConn, and a bunch of others. And I've listened to it 3 times. It's great. I pick up something from it every time.
Very good stuff. All right, so if you can go back in time and you can give Shaun Cole some advice 20 years ago, so basically it's actually maybe even we say not necessarily Shaun Cole player, Shaun Cole early coach. What would
Mm-hmm.
that advice be? So circa 2007.
Yeah, you referenced it earlier, and I think it's one of my good qualities, but also has been a bad one is slow down and appreciate the moment. I think back to a lot of the great things that I've been able to be a part of, and I was always going 100 miles an hour and thinking about the next thing and thinking about recruiting or thinking about this and not really staying in the moment and enjoying it.
All right. What about your favorite coaching memory? Kind of
Mm.
a piggyback question.
Yeah, once again, I mean, I've been really blessed with a lot of good ones. National championship. I every day the memories from that or people that I connect with or stories or just thinking about being on the field and seeing everybody smiling. The junior college championship, same deal, because that coaching staff and I still talk to pretty much all those guys. We were really good friends, and a bunch of young guys just getting into coaching and to have that success early on, and then both of those national teams, just like I said, the smiles on everybody's faces and the stories. And every time I see you or we've connected in the past, it's always at least one of those stories from the national team, and same with anybody else that was a part of it. So, yeah, I have a lot of them.
That's good stuff. All right, last one. We have a lot of kids and parents who listen to this podcast together, whether it's on the
Mm-hmm.
ride to practice or games. And the feedback has actually always been outstanding, in particular on college coaches. So,
Mm-hmm.
whether that was, Butch Thompson coming on or Matt Hobbs or some of the others we've had. So, if you could give one bit of advice to them, both parents and kids, what would it be?
Yeah, it's the same one that I give a lot, and it's really sit down and self evaluate where you fit best socially, academically, and where you're going to get the best baseball development, and list 3 to 5 of those schools and make it a point to go attend their camps. Like there were so many players in the past that I recruited, and I would ask them, who are the other schools recruiting you, and they would say Oregon and Texas Tech, and I would ask them, have you ever been to Eugene? Have you ever been to Lubbock? No. Okay, well, like you're gonna be living it. You're gonna go live there for 3 or 4 years, and then also you're gonna be with if you're a pitcher, you're going to be with me more than anybody. So like, do your best to try to go get to know those coaches, get to know that campus, get to know the town or city it's in, and really figure out academically if it's a fit for you. And then, like I said, socially, like those things are really important. And I just think I see a lot of families spending a boatload of money to travel the country, hoping to be seen by the schools they want to go to instead of just going directly to the source.
I love that. That's very, very important advice, and honestly, a lot of cost-saving advice too.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
great stuff. Well, hey, I appreciate not only you taking the time for this call, but I also appreciate your friendship, the opportunities, that you provided for me, the teaching that you've provided during those opportunities. I always enjoy our conversations, and this was certainly no exception. So, thanks so much for taking the time.
Always love our time, and please give the family and Tank a big hug for me, and Merry Christmas.
We'll do. Back at you, bud.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd be thrilled if you'd consider subscribing to the podcast and leaving us a review to read on iTunes. We welcome your suggestions for future guests and questions. Just email elitebaseballpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for your continued support, and we'll see you next episode.